All right, welcome everyone. I'm Pat Fligge, Director of Temple's Professional Network. Whether you're watching live or viewing the recording, I'm grateful you're here. If you have a question during tonight's presentation, feel free to leave it in the chat or come off of mute and interrupt me. But I do ask that unless you're asking a question, please remain on mute. And then we will have Q&A time at the very end of tonight's presentation. Tonight, we're talking about how to organize your job search. This is a complex task, and my guess is that everyone on this Zoom or watching this recording has navigated the job search before or is actively in one now. And so I'm wondering if anyone who's live tonight would want to describe a time that you navigated a complex task. I want to start with this question. It could be a complex task or just a messy process with lots of moving parts and variables. And your answer can't be a job search. That's what we are talking about. I'm just curious if anyone's got any other thoughts. While you're thinking, I'll start with a story, with my story to answer this question. So I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and my backyard looked a lot like this picture of a forest. And one time as a kid, there was this big storm. There's branches down everywhere. And I remember feeling totally overwhelmed. Like, how are we going to clean all of this up? And I remember my dad said to me, "Hey, Patrick, look, just start picking up sticks." All right, because sometimes that's the best you can do. Now, my hope is that after tonight, you can feel more organized about your job search process. So you're not just picking up the sticks of a job search. But I want to see if anyone else wanted to share a complex task and how they approached it. Anyone brave enough to come off of mute?
I know for me, just starting, like you said, is really important, but also just if I have a support system to lean on, like if I ask a professor a question, kind of get a clear understanding of what I do before I start is what I use.
That's great, Garly. Thank you for chiming in with that. I agree. I think a support system is critical, right? And it can be lonely to navigate complex tasks, especially something like a job search. So I'm really glad that you brought up that point. So tonight, just to share a little bit of an agenda, we'll start with finding your direction. We'll move into the job search basics, and then we'll talk about what I think about as the 3-category approach to job searching and how that intersects with those different categories. And then we'll close by talking about a key TPN tool, Career Shift, that you can use to help navigate this process. And again, if anyone has any thoughts, questions, comments along the way, feel free to interrupt, or I'll be checking the chat periodically. So before we jump into our job search, you have to find a direction or develop a focus. And I chose this picture to illustrate this point for 2 reasons, because I think that this process can be navigated either from the top down or the bottom up of this image. If it's from the top down, maybe you've been on a pathway, but now you're looking to branch out into 3 or 4 new directions. Or to look at things from bottom up on this picture, maybe you've been exploring 3 or 4 different areas, and now you're ready to settle on one path. Either is okay. I don't think you need to commit to just one path, but you also can't be so scattered that you'll get lost either. So you want to have some specificity, you want to have some direction before you get into your job search mode. So I want to offer a couple different activities to help you with that, how to find direction. So first one is career assessments, right? I'm sure that folks on here have probably taken career assessments before, familiar with them. One rule I have, if you're going to take a career assessment, is I want you to think about that as inspiration and not a restriction, right? Sometimes you take one of these assessments and it says, all right, this is your top career. These are 4 or 5 top careers, and it doesn't seem to fit. That's okay, right? When I took a career assessment a while ago, and the top choice that it suggested for me was heart surgeon. But none of the questions on the assessment asked me if I was scared of blood, which I am. I don't think I could be a surgeon. That wouldn't be my kind of environment. But I do love helping people. I like solving complex problems. I am interested in science. So I could kind of see how this assessment was pointing me in that direction. So I think these tools can be really good if you're stuck, if you're just really unsure, you're not sure what direction you need to move in. You can use this to gain some inspiration, but just don't feel restricted by what the results are. I think it can be really helpful to talk it through with someone. 2 assessments that I recommend. One's called ONET My Next Move. This is provided by the federal government. It's linked on the TPN website. Another one is called Focus 2, which you can find on Temple's Career Center website. I always encourage folks take maybe 1 or 2 different assessments. Another activity you could do, and this will work if you are currently working, is a simple pro-con activity. And what I would ask you to do is for 2 weeks while you're on the job, you definitely want to do this for at least 2 weeks, have a note on your phone or in a notebook where you're tracking pros and cons, times when the clock seems to totally disappear and times when time just drags on, right? What are things that belong in that pro column? What belongs in that con column? If you want to have a middle column too, that's okay. You want to track those reactions that you're having throughout your workday for at least 2 weeks, but you don't want to analyze during that period. You just want to try to notice like, hey, am I really enjoying what I'm doing right now or am I not, right? After those at least 2 weeks go by, then you can sit down and analyze that and see, all right, are there themes or patterns that I can identify? Are you triggered in a positive or negative way by certain parts of your day or certain coworkers or people you have to interact with? Are there any surprises after you do that activity or catalysts to how you're feeling, right? It might help you identify, all right, what do I want more of in my career or what do I want less of? Similar to that pro-con activity is a resume audit. Now, what I mean by this is you want to take your resume and add every possible job to it and every possible bullet for all of those jobs. And then you go back and evaluate, are you engaged in those activities? You can do a similar pro-con or check plus, check minus system. That can help you analyze not just the current work you've been doing, but stuff you've done back in the past. And you can go way back, whatever is most helpful. This process is just for you. If you're looking for more of these tips, I suggest searching for the hashtag TPN tip on Facebook and Twitter. We put out some great reflection content back in the summertime on the Temple alumni channels. So you can look for that content if you're trying to find your own direction or focus. Before I go to the next slide, I don't know if anyone else has maybe taken a career assessment before, and did you get an answer or a response that you were confused by or you just were really unsure of? And I don't know if anyone has a story like that they'd like to share. All right, no takers. That's all right. We'll keep moving. All right, so you've got your direction, right? Now I want to talk through some of the basics of the job search, right? And because Stella wants you to make sure you've got these basics down. That's why I put her here on this slide. So number one, first basic category you want to think about, geography. And nowadays also kind of combined in here is hybrid or work from home, right? What are your preferences here? Are you targeting a specific city or metro area? Maybe it's the same one you're in, maybe it's a different one. Maybe you want a job that's completely work from home, or you need something that is hybrid or in person. However you land on these variables, it's good to get clear what's ideal, right? If you could pick it, what would be your top choice here? Second category, call this top 3, top 10. And this is where we go back to that slide about the paths that I showed, right? You don't necessarily have to have one exact path identified, but can you choose, all right, I think these are my top 3 industries that I want to explore, and these are my top 10 employers in each of those industries. And commit to that for maybe a month or 2, right? You can shift things as time goes on, but you want to have some focus to start. And then the last category I want to introduce here under the basics are these 4 lenses. I think it's helpful to have some lenses to use to evaluate the jobs that you're looking at in any job search. And so I offer these 4. I think they're pretty straightforward, but I will go through and define them, especially as you're comparing one job to the next and trying to figure out, well, what really is the best pathway to follow. So in my mind, these 4 lenses are mission, function, culture, and compensation. Mission is the goal of the organization. What's the ultimate goal, right? So for Temple, we're trying to educate people. Your function is your specific role's responsibility. And sometimes that's really aligned to the mission and sometimes it's not, right? So if we stay with that Temple example, Temple's got professors and that's perfectly aligned with the goal, right? But we've got marketing folks and accountants, food service, right? Maybe those folks in those other roles, they want to have that role at a mission that they identify with or is important to them, or maybe not. So those mission and function, they don't always have to be linked, but they can be in either direct or indirect ways. Culture is how it feels to work there, right? You can have the exact same job title, exact same function, but very different experience at one organization versus another. And then finally, compensation. And I think the key here is it's more than just salary, right? It's benefits, it's time off, it's all the other things that are wrapped around that compensation conversation. All right, so now I want to get into the meat of tonight's presentation and talk through this 3-category approach that I mentioned. And so what we're going to do is dive down searching for jobs, companies, and networking contacts. And the other frame that I want to offer here too is thinking about whether you have a reactive or a proactive approach. And I think you need to have both. I think what happens though is most job seekers are rather reactive in their approach. You're just looking for what's posted now that you can react to and send an application to. That's an important part of this process, but part of it is also being proactive and thinking about, well, who can I reach out to? What companies can I research? And we'll dive into this in a second, but it's sort of letting go of the metric of how many jobs did I apply to today, and more thinking about what are the long-term steps I'm taking to set myself up for success. So category 1 of this 3-category approach to job searching is jobs, right? The obvious one. You need to track what are the jobs that you're applying for. So these are some things I think you want to keep track of. Maybe it's in a Word doc or an Excel doc or a shared document of some kind. We want to look at what are the job postings you're qualified for, that you have applied for, that you're planning to apply for. Maybe track the dates you send in those applications, when you've landed interviews, other key deadlines, especially if they said, hey, we need your references by a certain date, or you've been assigned a project to do, and what's the date that that's due. You also want to track, well, who are the networking contacts that I have connected to that company? What were my interviewers' names? Who are the HR reps or recruiters that I interacted with in the process? And then you can maybe track things like, what were any follow-up steps, like a project that you had to do, or did you send your thank you notes? Some other things you want to track that are connected to keeping track of jobs. And this might seem a little different, but you also want to look at jobs that are above or below your experience level, right? So if you're on a job board or you're on a company's job site, maybe you're targeting a specific experience level. Maybe it's like a director level position, right? But you also want to look at, well, what are the entry level positions that might exist, and what are the way above, VP level, way up the food chain from where you're at experience wise? Because part of this process is not just identifying what's a job I can apply for, but who has the right team, right? Where does the job exist? So if there's a job above or below your experience level, that tells you if the right team exists at that employer, even if the right job isn't posted yet. And that's probably worth keeping track of. So let's talk a little bit more about that, right? Because I think the second category of information that you want to keep track of to stay organized are who your target companies are. So what are you tracking here? Well, you can base your targets on lots of things. Maybe it's culture, right? Just about every metro area puts out a top workplaces in the Philadelphia region list, right? So you could look there to try to figure out, well, maybe where are the top culture locations? Location could be an important factor for you, right? What's within your commutable distance if you're looking for a hybrid or in-person position? Also, alignment with your values or interests. I think especially nowadays, people are very motivated by knowing, does this company, do they value the same things I value? So you want to make sure you're keeping track of that too. Other things to think about, and I think are easy to overlook, what are companies that you're a customer of, right? That you follow on social media, that you admire for one reason or another. And as you're tracking these target companies, you want to make sure you're saving their career sites, right? And checking back there regularly. I heard this one time that sometimes it's the way companies advertise their jobs are as if you lost your dog, but the only place you put up missing dog posters was on your own front door, right? So just make sure that you're not only spending time on job boards, but you're looking at your target company's career sites, because that's where they're going to post that information right away, right? Other things you want to keep track here and do connected to target companies is following them on social media, right? You want to familiarize yourself with their voice, the news they're putting out there, the news that's covering them. The more you can identify with their brand, talk as if you already work there because you're familiar with the language that they're using publicly or that people are sharing in interviews, especially if it's big companies. They might have leaders who are doing video interviews that you can pick up on a ton of insight. If you can sound like you already work at that organization because you've been tracking the information they've been putting out there, it's going to give you a real leg up. Now, the thing you don't want to worry about as you're keeping track of these target companies is whether they have an open job right now, right? Because you can't predict when they might be hiring. If this is a target company and you know you'd love to work there, let's make sure that we're checking back at their career sites regularly, that you're researching their social media, that you're finding contacts connected to that company. I'll tell a short story. I worked with a job seeker a couple of years ago who really wanted to break into the publishing industry. So she had a great conversation with an organization, wasn't going to work out in the moment. Then a week later, they said, hey, we're about to post a job. It'd be very similar to this one. Why don't you give me your resume and cover letter ahead of time, right? So sometimes when that job gets posted, you might already be behind a couple applicants because they had something in the works already, right? They had identified that target company and worked to build relationships there. So the more time, it is a little bit longer term thinking, right? This is that proactive approach. You're not worried about, is there something posted at the moment, but how can I put myself in the right position so that when that job is posted, I'm ready to act. Third category of information to be more organized about this approach are your networking contacts, right? And here's the things I think you got to track under this category. Think of the people you already know who can be helpful, right? We just had Thanksgiving. Who's sitting around that table? Who did you talk or text to on the holidays? If it's not that person can be directly helpful, maybe they can introduce you to someone else who can be helpful. So this whole theory about the strength of weaker ties, that is often one person removed is the most helpful person to talk to. Other people you want to try to identify. Who has the job you want, right? Who has that job title, or who works at your target company? Maybe they're not on the right team, but they can refer you internally to the right people. And as you identify networking contacts who maybe have that right job right now, look at where they worked in the past, right? Especially if you're on LinkedIn or Owl Network, see what their other employers are, because that can help you identify some new companies. Other information you want to keep track of under this category is their contact info and how they like to be contacted. Notes on your conversations. This one's key. People think I have a good memory. I just try to take good notes and then refer back to them, right? When was the last time you contacted them? Any notable conversation points or takeaways that you can use for follow-up, right? Maybe they mentioned they're going on a big vacation in the new year. Mark that down. Easy way to follow up with them. Ask them, hey, how was that cruise you took, right? Another thing you might want to keep track of is if they refer you to another person. So who do they connect you to? And that way, when you have a conversation with that new person, follow up with the original and let them know how it went. I also encourage you, as you're keeping track of these networking contacts, to return to this list and reflect on what advice you took away from each conversation, how that can make you a stronger candidate, right? Some conversations, it'll just be a one-time. You might not circle back to them, but there could be lessons that really stick with you. So refer back to this information in this category especially, but really all your categories. Just think, what am I learning from each step of this process? Now, you might have noticed as I was talking about those three categories that they kind of interact with one another, right? Each category can help you with another one, and you can get started or focus on one category one day and another category another day. So as you find a job posting, think, should this be a target company, or what networking contacts can I identify at this new company? As you put those target companies on your list, who do you know that works there, right? Can you find a Temple Owl using LinkedIn or Owl Network? And then, like I said, for each networking contact, where did they used to work? What other job titles do they have? Does that help you find new keywords to keep your job searches alive? So you can really learn a lot from each of these categories and see how these three categories can interact with one another. I think a lot about it as like an Excel sheet or a Google sheet, and maybe each tab represents one different category, or maybe you want to put it all in one big format. I'll talk a little bit more about organization in a slide or two, but think about how each of these categories informs the others. And this also might help you keep your process fresh, right? Like I said before, maybe you spend one day a week on each category and see where that takes you. Now, as you execute your process, an important thing to think about is, well, what are my metrics for progress, right? Job searching is tough. It's lonely. You're often doing this alone, like we talked about before. You're constantly being evaluated in this process. It's tough to navigate. Your metrics for progress should be the parts of it you can control, right? You can't control whether a company gets back to you, whether networking contact reaches back out to you, but you can control your effort, right? How many quality applications did you make today? How many networking outreach messages did you send? How much new information did you learn about your target companies? If you make those your metrics for progress, it'll just help you feel a little more grounded as you execute this process. Now, the next thing I want to go into is our key TPN tool to showcase tonight, which is called CareerShift. It's going to help you automate this process, or just organize this process automatically. I'll pause for a second to see if there are any questions, if anyone wants to come off mute or drop something in the chat, and so I can get a quick drink of water.
Are those who are attending this session going to get the recording as well?
You will. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Everyone on tonight will get the recording and the slides.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Good question. All right, let's keep moving on. So Career Shift, this is our key TPN tool. I'm going to stop the share for just a second so I can load this on my screen. All right, can I get a thumbs up from someone if you can now see this new screen that I'm sharing? Great, awesome, thank you. So this is the TPN website. All right, this link will be in the email that we send out afterwards. The Career Shift platform is found here under the Explore box, and then it's in our online career resources, Career Shift. Once you get there, it'll look like this. Right now, you will need your Temple email to access this. If you don't have your Temple email anymore, you're not using it, that's okay. You can reactivate it. It's linked on that site that this links you to. So you can get that set up for yourself. Now, if you're thinking about this 3-category approach, you can't help but follow it if you're using Career Shift. I want to show you right here under dashboard, this is where you want to live, right? This has got all these good categories right here for you. So for instance, if we start at jobs and go to the search button, this brings up a ton of filters, especially if I hit advanced search. The great thing about Career Shift is that it aggregates together job postings from across the internet. So that way you don't have to look from job board to job board. This is pushing them all into one place. So to demo a search, I'm just going to look for digital marketing. I'll hit the search button. You see we get a ton of results here. Now, if you want to apply for this job or learn more and you click on any of the links, it should take you out to that job board where it's posted. Sometimes it'll take you directly to the company site. I always suggest no matter where you find a job, try to find it on that company's actual HR site and apply there. That's normally the best way to get them your information. But you can also see that this helps you identify, well, who are contacts at that organization, right? I can click on, you can find the company name, right? So you can see, all right, where is it? Locate this job, a ton of information, and it starts to stitch together that 3-leg process, right? That 3-category approach. You can also begin on Career Shift by searching for contacts, right? So again, back here in the dashboard under contacts, I'm going to click search. So you could add a person's name if you know someone there, or maybe you just want to look under an industry, right? So maybe you want to find people in advertising and marketing. Then what you can do to narrow it down to Temple is put Temple University here in school attended. I like to put it in quotes. Now, a key thing to think about here, you might want to try both a search under Temple University and then maybe a search under a specific school or college at Temple, especially if it aligns directly to one specific industry. So just think about that as you're approaching this. But now when I hit search, it's bringing up all of the Temple alums that it's understanding them as being in advertising and marketing. And as you can see, it's got some great contact info here too, right? You can find people's emails, their LinkedIn's. This is just pulling publicly available data that's on the internet to organize it in one place for you. So if you want to start by searching for contacts, this is sort of a great way to approach it. Finally, you could also search under target companies, right? If we hit the search bar here, you can add in a keyword or a description, right? So maybe you're trying to figure out, all right, what are other digital marketing companies that exist? Hit search, and now you've got a ton of responses, right? Thousands. And you can easily go and see, all right, what are the company jobs at FedEx Corporation? Who are the contacts at FedEx? So I hope you see that this sort of combines those 3 methods, right? No matter where you start here, whether it's jobs, companies, or contacts, it's going to stitch together what's the other information from those other categories. Career Shift also lets you hold all this information here too. So if you see here on the left-hand side, you can save jobs. It'll put it in these folders under jobs, contacts, companies. You can save your documents here, like resumes and cover letters. That way it's all in one place. You don't have to worry about tracking it down. If your mind wants to organize it differently than the way Career Shift has set it up, you can create new folders or manage folders. So it really just helps you if this 3-category approach seems to fit with your strategy. If you go here onto Career Shift, you really can't help but follow it. It's going to guide you along those pathways. Now, before I go back to the slides, just for a couple closing comments, any questions? Anyone want to see anything again here? Again, you will get the recording of this, but did want to pause for a moment in case anyone had any questions or comments about this system. All right, let's get back in here to the slides. Oh, Okay, can I get a thumbs up if someone's seeing the slides again? Perfect, perfect. Thanks, everybody. All right. So what's next, right? So we talked a lot about this job search organization process. What's next? Think about application documents and interview preparation. And if those are questions that are on your mind, we've got a webinar coming up on December 15th, Ace Your Application and Job Search. You can find it on the TPN website, on the Temple Alumni website. So I hope if you got those questions too, that you consider attending that webinar on 12/15, or again, if you're interested in the content but can't make it live, just register and you'll automatically receive a recording. But that does wrap up tonight's presentation. I'm really grateful for everyone who attended live, and for the folks who are watching this on recording in the future. Hope this is helpful, but we'll stop the recording in a second. And if anyone here that is live has any questions, I'm happy to stick around and chat. But thank you all so much.